remotest corners of the earth, far from traffic, lights, or help, the wilderness watches. Some go into the wild seeking peace, others vanish without a trace. These aren't legends whispered around a fire. These are 4 real stories from those who survived something unnatural. A camper who stumbled into a nightmare. A bushwalker whose trail led somewhere it shouldn't have. A family who saw something they can't explain. And a man who learned that sometimes the woods whisper back. I'm Dr. Insomnia, and these are 4 true encounters with the haunted wild. Told through the eyes of a seasoned bush explorer with years trekking through Australia's harshest terrain, this account dives into an encounter that nearly ended in tragedy deep in the Blue Mountains. I've spent over 2 decades patrolling the vast, verdant expanses of the Pacific Northwest. The forest has always been a place of solace, its towering pines and whispering winds a constant companion. But in the summer of 2015, my perception of these woods changed forever. It began with reports from hikers about a figure watching them from the tree line. Descriptions varied. Some saw a tall, shadowy silhouette. Others mentioned glowing eyes that vanished when approached. Initially, I dismissed these as overactive imaginations or misidentified wildlife. One evening, while on a routine patrol near the old logging trails, I felt an unshakable sensation of being watched. The air grew still, and the usual chorus of forest sounds fell silent. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement, a tall, dark figure standing between the trees. When I turned to face it directly, it was gone. Over the following weeks, similar encounters became more frequent. Campers reported waking up to find their tents unzipped, with no signs of intrusion. Others spoke of hearing whispers in the night, unintelligible, yet undeniably human. The forest, once a place of peace, now felt oppressive, as if the trees themselves were closing in. Determined to uncover the truth, I set up trail cameras in areas with the most reports. Days turned into weeks with no significant findings, until one morning I reviewed footage that chilled me to the bone. At precisely 3 a.m., a tall, emaciated figure appeared on the footage. Its limbs were unnaturally long, and its eyes glowed with an eerie light. It stood motionless, staring directly into the camera before vanishing without a trace. I reported the findings to my superiors, but the footage mysteriously disappeared from our records. Colleagues began to avoid certain areas of the park, and some even transferred to other locations. As for me, I continue my patrols, ever watchful, knowing that something ancient and unknowable watches back. Through the journaled memories of a lone kayaker with a thirst for remote adventures, this story captures what it feels like when isolation turns into something far more sinister on the haunted waters of Lake Superstition. I've hunted these woods for over 30 years. The towering pines, the crisp air, the silence. It's where I find peace. But one winter, the forest changed. It was late January and the snow was relentless. I set out early, hoping to track a buck I'd seen the week before. The forest was eerily quiet, muffled by the thick blanket of snow. As I ventured deeper, I noticed the usual signs were absent. No tracks, no scat, no rustling in the underbrush. It was as if the forest inhabitants had vanished. After hours of trekking, I stumbled upon a set of tracks, elongated, almost human, but with an unnatural stride. Curiosity piqued, I followed them. The tracks led me to a clearing where the trees stood unnaturally still. Suddenly, a foul stench hit me, rot and decay. Then, a chilling howl pierced the silence, unlike any animal I had ever heard. I froze, heart pounding. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a tall, gaunt figure with glowing eyes and antlers protruding from its head. It stood motionless, watching me. I raised my rifle, but my hands trembled. The creature let out another howl, and I bolted, adrenaline fueling my escape. I didn't stop until I reached my cabin, locking the door behind me. That night I couldn't sleep. The creature's image burned into my mind. I later learned of the Wendigo, a malevolent spirit from Algonquian folklore associated with insatiable hunger and cannibalism. Some believe it's a cautionary tale, others claim it's real. After that encounter, I believe the latter. Told from the recollections of a wilderness survivalist who spent much of his life seeking solitude in Alaska's harshest terrains, this story recounts a haunting experience that made him question whether something unnatural lurked in the woods. He had been to this stretch of forest before, miles from the nearest trail where even GPS fails to hold signal. He trusted this place. It was peaceful, quiet, undisturbed. But this time, something felt different. It began the moment he stepped out of his truck. The usual chirps of birds and hums of wind through pine were replaced by an eerie stillness. He thought maybe a predator was nearby. He'd seen bears and even wolves in these woods before, but this wasn't that kind of silence. This was watching silence. That night, the wind picked up violently, roaring through the trees. But inside his tent, the air was still. Too still. He couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., he heard what sounded like footsteps circling the tent. Slow, deliberate, crunching the frostbitten undergrowth. He gripped his flashlight and blade. When he finally dared unzip the tent and shine his light, there was nothing there. No tracks, no movement. Just the trees swaying unnaturally, as if they were trying to warn him. The next day, he tried to shake it off. He hiked higher into the ridge, but every time he stopped, he felt something stop behind him. And once, when adjusting his gear, he turned and saw a figure, tall, lanky, pale-skinned, duck behind a tree. He gave chase, heart pounding. Nothing. It vanished. That night, the sounds returned. This time, they were louder, not footsteps, but scraping, like something dragging claws across stone. Then came the whispering, dozens of faint voices, overlapping like wind through dying trees. Go, go, they said. Or maybe, no, no. It was hard to tell. He packed before sunrise. When he reached his truck, the windows were fogged, from the inside. Across the condensation, someone had drawn 5 handprints. Long fingers, too long. He never returned to that part of Alaska. And now, years later, he says he still dreams of those trees. In the dream, he's lost in the woods. But something always finds him. And when he wakes, the sound of footsteps fades down the hall outside his door.
As told by a retired park ranger known for patrolling some of the most remote and treacherous areas of Appalachia, this chilling account hints at something older than folklore, lurking just beyond the firelight. I've spent countless weekends exploring the trails of the Blue Mountains. The rugged beauty, the serenity, and the challenge of the terrain have always drawn me in. But one expedition in the spring of 2018 left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the Australian bush. I had set out on a solo trek aiming to chart a less traveled path near the Megalong Valley. Equipped with my gear, maps, and a reliable GPS, I felt confident navigating the dense eucalyptus forests and steep ridges. The first day was uneventful, filled with the usual sights and sounds of the bush. But as dusk approached, an unsettling stillness settled over the area. The usual chorus of birds and insects fell silent, replaced by an oppressive quiet. That night, as I set up camp near a small creek, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder repeatedly. I chalked it up to nerves and fatigue, convincing myself that a good night's sleep would restore my usual composure. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by a series of loud, guttural growls echoing through the trees. They were unlike any animal sounds I'd ever heard. Deep, resonant, and filled with a primal intensity. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the surrounding darkness, but saw nothing. The growls ceased, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. The next morning, I discovered massive footprints near my campsite. Each print was over 40 centimeters long, with a distinct five-toed pattern. The depth of the impressions suggested a creature of considerable weight. I photographed the prints and noted their direction, which led deeper into the forest.
Despite my apprehension, curiosity compelled me to follow the trail. As I ventured further, I noticed broken branches and disturbed underbrush, as if something large had recently passed through. After several hours, I reached a clearing where the trail abruptly ended. At the center stood a makeshift structure, a dome of intertwined branches and foliage resembling a primitive shelter. Inside, I found bones of various animals, some stripped clean, others partially gnawed. Suddenly, a deafening roar erupted from the tree line, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush. I turned to see a massive, ape-like figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It stood over 2 meters tall, covered in dark, matted hair, with glowing red eyes that locked onto mine. For a moment we stared at each other, the air thick with tension. Then, with a final roar, the creature turned and vanished into the forest. I didn't wait to see if it would return. I retraced my steps, moving as quickly as the terrain allowed, and didn't stop until I reached the safety of my vehicle. In the days that followed, I researched similar encounters and came across numerous reports of a creature known as the Yowie, a legendary being from Aboriginal folklore, described as a large, hairy, ape-like creature that roams the Australian wilderness. The descriptions matched what I had seen, down to the glowing red eyes and the guttural growls. Since that encounter, I've been hesitant to venture into the more remote areas of the bush alone. The memory of that night serves as a stark reminder that there are still mysteries lurking in the wild, waiting to be discovered or avoided. 4 people walked into the wilderness. What they brought back were scars, memories, and unanswered questions. If you've ever felt something watching you in the trees, maybe you weren't alone. Let me know which story chilled you the most in the comments. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I've got more True Darkness on the way. This is Dr. Insomnia reminding you, don't trust the silence in the woods.